All right, welcome to the Bryce Eddy Show. So today my guest is Monty Bennett, and he's got a solution to crime, and we're going to hear about that and talk to him a little bit about what's happening in the world of crime. And I guess we're going to talk about a bunch of cities. Most of them are blue. So what are you going to do? Anyway, Monty, how are you, sir?
Great to be with you, Bryce.
Yeah, so this is a fairly regular subject for me because obviously there's been a massive deterioration right now in our cities, and it's really been, let's call it, highlighted over the last several years. And we have kind of, I think we have a very thin veneer of civilization, and it started to crumble a little bit to where places that even a decade ago were okay for us to go are now completely something that you should avoid. There were always pockets of bad neighborhoods and things like that, but generally the advice that I give people is, stay out of the cities. And it's not just a few cities anymore, but it's kind of all worldwide. We've just allowed the criminals to kind of take over. I think a lot of it's bad policy. I want to ask you what you think. But first, before we get into what you're doing specifically, give me your background, kind of your quick high-level bio, and, how you came to be, working on this stuff.
Sure. Well, I came to faith when I was in high school, and I faced an important part of my life. But really, for most of my career, I've been in the hotel business, and I was first in the business with my father, and then on my own for many, many years. I grew up in Houston, Texas, went up to upstate New York for college and MBA school, and then came back to Dallas to be in business, and have just worked in business for a long time. And it was really just a few years ago that I realized that I needed to be just much more involved. And I put the blame on myself, people in the church, myself, and people in the business community, myself. And that 50 years or more ago, people like myself would be on the city council. We would be on the school board and these kinds of things. We helped run our communities. But many people, like I did in the late 80s and 90s when I started getting involved, just said, you know what, I'm not going to deal with all that foolishness. I'm just going to go to my church and go to my business and run my life and have a family and these kinds of things. And so the public arena has been abandoned by people of faith, by people in the business. And we've got what we've got because of that. And so I felt very convicted and decided to try to make up for many, many years of not being involved in the past number of years. I've gotten involved. One of them is I started a local newspaper called the Dallas Express, and it's at dallasexpress.com. And we print the news. And you know how rare that is to get just the straight news. The local newspaper, Dallas Morning News, far left, loses money, is now being bought out by some New York firm, and you can't get local news hardly. And so we just print the news, and we now have over 500,000 subscribers, maybe $250,000 people any given day are subscribers and receive our email. And of course, we've got the website and the app, and we're on Twitter at Dallas Express, delivering the news. And that was part of the plan. So anyway, I got involved in a number of areas in order to help my community.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny because this topic, of course, was huge, Christians in politics and all that stuff during COVID, because, we were exposed, during that time that the church just was not involved, and the church kind of, outsourced to others or just abdicated the responsibility. And it's been bubbling up again recently. I've had a couple of people on the show where this has been the subject, and a couple of people still believe that Christians should not be, and I think that's a mistake. And I always tell people the simplest form or the simplest definition of politics is just how we organize ourselves, and it's absolutely absurd for you as a believer or a Christian to think that the church has no part in that, or a Christian has no part in that. We should be a part of organizing a society. And I think that attitude that did creep in the, let's call it the, 70s and 80s, are sowed the seeds for what we're reaping today, in our political sphere, in our world, and just the, kind of secular humanism that's now reigning supreme as an ideology across our land. I'm glad you came to that realization, but it's so few people really are getting involved like they need to, and so I commend you on that, and I commend you putting your money where your mouth is.
Well, thank you. And it is getting better. And there's more and more people dipping their toe in the water. The church generally is reluctant to get out there very much. And I think it has a lot to do with the media. We have become so afraid of what the media says. And if it's in the paper, then they believe that everybody believes it, even though if you poll people, no one believes what's in the paper anymore.
Yeah.
But we've become afraid of it, and we've become afraid of being salt and light and asserting our worldview, because everyone has some worldview. There's no God absent or God neutral worldview. It's all some type of belief system around theology that people have, whether they admit it or not. And this worldview, we I think took it for granted and thought everything would be just fine if we went and just kind of minded our own business, and it's not fine. And I thought government would take care of itself, and it did take care of itself very much, and they helped themselves all the time. And that has just got to change, and it's got to change with business leaders too. Business leaders like to go run their business and do their thing, and that's great, but they also need to give some of their time and give their monies in order to change our societies. If you look at some of these problems in our cities, these aren't hard problems. I mean, we make it out like they're hard.
Right.
I interviewed a PR person not too long ago, and she didn't come to work for me, but she said something like, "Yeah, Monty, I hope I can work with you on these complex problems." I said, No, they're not complex at all. In fact, your job as my PR person is to explain these are very simple problems. It's just that the people that don't want to solve them for their own reasons try to make them out to be complicated, because then you don't blame them when they're not solved. They're imminently solved.
No, I think that part of that too is the activist culture, right? You have these activists that if you really, number one, you cannot solve a problem that you refuse to properly define. That's why calling things, euphemisms like, homelessness. It's not homelessness. Homelessness is a meaningless euphemism, and it's designed to, have this illusion of complexity or change the nature of what the problem is. The truth is we have drug addiction and, mental health issues allowed to proliferate on our streets. You could give them all apartment keys and you're not going to solve the problem. In fact, most of them will not take you up on shelters and things like that. This is a culture of people who want to use drugs or are, mental issues, and sometimes it's one and the same. But unless we define it properly, we can't solve it. The solutions are very clear, I think, for most all of these things, and then they are exasperated by just a horrible political ideology and horrible policies that are wrecking our cities. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that there's no question. Back in the old days, if someone was down on their luck and they went to a church or someplace for help, the first thing they'd do is they'd say, "Okay, you got a parent, you got a brother, you got a sister, you got a cousin," and they'd call them up. They'd say, "Hey, your brother Johnny's here. Come take care of your brother. Come down and help him. It's your responsibility." Well, that whole notion is now gone. But you see it in the fact that if you look at the homeless people, they're primarily white and black men. Well, are white and black men discriminated more in housing than other people? Well, no, of course not. The issue is cultural. Is in Hispanic families, my wife is Hispanic, you see a much more family-centric dynamic. They're not going to let Uncle Pedro go out there on the street because it brings shame to their family, and they're going to bring them in and help them. Even that uncle doesn't want to be on the street because he knows it brings shame to him and his family. You don't see women out on the streets because women have very severe potential consequences to them to being on the street. They work hard to not be on the street. White men and black men generally just don't work as hard not to be on the streets. Yes, there's difficult cases, and yes, there's exceptions, and on and on and on. But the point is we don't have a culture of taking care of our family members and taking care of each other. And we've got a culture that it's okay in certain circles to run out and just do what you want and be a burden on society. And there's no motivation for, look, I've been to college. I can see how disgusting boys and men can live left to their own devices, right? Women can't deal with that generally, and they won't do it. And they often have children with them. But men can just live like absolute slobs, and they need pressure on them to go get the help that they need. And if they won't get the help, well, then they can't be here. They can't take public property and convert it to private property just because they won't get help. That's what we cannot allow, and what we have allowed. And we have a whole permissive structure that somehow is the most compatible thing. Look, there's addiction in my family, a good amount of it. The worst mistakes I've ever made is when I ever did something that the addict said they wanted me to do. That's the last person you listen to. You don't listen to the addict. You have to give the addict what they need, not what they say they want. And these poor people in the streets, they need help. And if it's against their will and they don't want help, well, then they need to go someplace else.
Yeah, and there's a place for compassion, obviously, but what we've done is kind of weaponize it. And people, especially on the political left, there is a compassion for the folks on the street, but not a compassion for the people whose businesses are being affected by, somebody urinating outside of their stoop.
Right.
I mean, it's really a funny thing that they will excuse so much of that behavior. We really don't have. I'm recording from the Boise area today of Idaho, and we actually have a really beautiful downtown. We have a very blue mayor, pretty far left political structure, but the one thing that they do right that has been kind of a consistent policy that I hope they never change is they don't really allow homelessness. And by that, they give them a choice. Here is a shelter. You can be here. We're going to take your things from you and we're going to put it in this shelter, or you can get on a bus and leave. We're not going to allow it. And as a result, our downtown is very safe, very clean. I mean, I have no problem with, family members of mine, spending an evening walking downtown. I mean, it's very safe and very different because they just don't allow it. And you get more of what you allow. And you see these cities, doing this thing where they are allowing, overnight camping on the streets and, all of these sort of things. And they just won't move people out or move them along. And a lot of these folks, if they have no choice, they will go and get the help that they need. But if you're giving them the choice to be on the street, they're choosing it. And many of them, when you interview, are saying, yeah, no, out here I can get my drugs. If I go into the shelter, I cannot. And a lot of it has to do with that. Let's if you have a comment on that, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to shift gears towards crime because I know that that's been, one of your major focuses now. And obviously the two are related.
Yeah, you bet. I'd love to talk a little bit about crime. In Dallas, we've got a crime problem. We've had a crime problem. And there's an organization here called Dallas Hero, which is a group of people that came together and wanted to do something about it. And they wanted to put a proposition on the ballot to amend the city charter, to push the city and require the city to hire 4,000 police officers and raise the pay to the top 5 of all police departments in the North Texas area. And they enlisted me to be one of their larger donors. And because a lot of them are concerned about retribution, which is real and happens, I've somehow become kind of a spokesperson of sorts, an unappointed spokesperson or advocate for it, because it's needed. And
so you're taking all the heat? Is that what I understand?
Such as it is. But, look, we're all grown-ups, right? I mean, I live in a beautiful home in a beautiful city. If someone doesn't like that and doesn't like me, there's a lot worse things that can happen, right?
Now, let me ask you a quick question on that. So, I want to hear what you guys are exactly doing, but based on what you said so far, I mean, the hiring of more police officers, the increase in pay, what is the objection? Is it just purely the environment against police right now? Is that the kind of hate that you're getting, or are they just directing it at you personally because you're getting involved in, wrecking their political game?
It's funny. The city rounded up 19 civic and business organizations to come out against these common sense amendments. And they outspent the Dallas Euro Group 8-1 trying to defeat these.
Wow.
And we still won. And the reasons were all kinds of reasons. About 3/4 of the reasons were just made up. They'd say things like, this requires us to hire 1,000 police officers in a year, and we can't train that many. Well, it doesn't require to hire 1,000 in a year. Just made up, purposeful lies. And the only one that had any type of sense whatsoever, which actually doesn't have any sense, but it's something like, well, this is a crude tool, and it should be done more nuanced by the city council and done the right way. To which the response is, well, it's still a tool and the city council ain't doing it. So this is the people taking matters into their own camp. We have a blue city, and this blue city voted for it. But it's not done the right way, or it does this. It's just a bunch of baloney. Business groups came out against it. And in the end, the reason is kind of a list of, one, number of them are captured. They all get business from the cities, so they better do what they say. 2, there's a number of former politicians from the city in these business groups, which have strong opinions and push their way around. Some of the business leaders themselves, many of them are great folks. Many of them are, but some of them are they don't like their name in print. They just kind of
don't want any controversy.
They don't want any controversy. They just kind of want to go along, get along, and kind of do their thing. And as a result, our city suffers. And people say, well, Monty, the people, these people don't like you about that. And I'm like, it's kind of like a child. If you love your child, you'll discipline your child, no matter if your child likes it or not. And I love my city. And if my city needs some discipline by having some order in this regard, well, then it's incumbent upon me to do it. And I would argue that these business groups don't love their city because they let the city do whatever they want and get away with anything. And it's a mess. And downtown's been a mess. Although recently some improvement in the past 3 months, to be fair, but our crime's a problem. And they say they don't have the money. But then you say, well, why don't you go hire one of these firms that does an efficiency audit, and they can come through all city government and tell you where you look. Any organization that's been around for 10 or 20 years is going to have all kinds of inefficiencies. Well, they've been around for 100+ years. Well, no, they won't go spend the money. Well, let's just tell you, they got no interest. They're not serious. They like to do just enough so they can say they're doing something when they're not doing something, because they do have crazies on the far left saying, don't do this. This is terrible. You can't put people in jail and all this stuff. So they're just trying to balance the factions that they're hearing from. And that's why they need a voice from the common sense crowd saying, look, you can do some of your nutty stuff, but one of your basic requirements is crime prevention and to make sure the homeless get the help they need and to be off the streets. And that voice needs to be louder, needs to be amplified.
Yeah, no, policing works. I mean, putting more police on the street, doing their jobs, right? And so they have to have support from uh, from the city, from the mayor, from the powers that be, from the community. But putting more police out there works,
It's
and
amazing,
and
isn't it?
we, yeah, I mean it's wild. But the surprising thing is always how many people in the poorer communities really do want that and are
Oh,
desperate for it. I mean, that's kind of a little, known thing that they don't talk about because it's embarrassing to their narrative that it's all, racist police officers, going after the, black and brown folks, when we know that that's not the case. I mean, it's absurd just on its face, because I mean, half the police officers in some of these cities are black and brown and are, very much in favor of good police work and, wanting to see it done and wanting to see their neighborhoods safe and crime to be battled. If you empower police officers, in any community, the complexion changes a lot, and by complexion I mean you get rid of criminals, not the good people.
it's amazing how racist the far left is.
Oh,
Uh, the, uh,
phenomenal.
the people they pretend to want to protect want more police,
Yeah,
and the far left, the white far left, says, "Oh, no, 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 we know better than you. You don't want more police. We're not going to give you more police." Meanwhile, in the city of Dallas, it is actually difficult to be murdered if you're a white person. If you're black and if you're brown, you will get murdered all the time. And it's a terrible, terrible, terrible tragedy. And it's these people that they perpetrate to help our black and brown friends that are suffering because of it. And it's extraordinary racism perpetrated upon them. And it's terrible. We need police. We need to stop this epidemic and this crime cycle. And we need to get these people educated in these poor communities, which are, of course, all races. But the far left is just terrible, and they're racist.
yeah.
It needs to stop.
No, the left is racist through and through to their core, and a lot of it is because they want to pat these folks on the head and make the decisions for them. They really truly do believe that most people are beneath them, and they should be the ones to control things. They try to stay ahead of it by just changing the definitions and telling you, oh, they can't possibly be racist, because they define racism as power structures and baloney like that. And again, that's just to try to confuse people, but we're not confused. They're actually evil in their ideology. I'm interested. Obviously, this is a show that's a national show, and we have a national audience. You're seeing things happen like we've seen in DC, where hey, you put law enforcement on the street, you back them, all of a sudden there's no murders for a couple of weeks, and everybody's behaving and everybody feels safe. And I think even the liberals in the DC area right now are admitting, yeah, it's pretty good. I'm okay with walking down the street tonight. How do we take this and duplicate this in other cities?
Well, I don't know, because you have a lot of those left wingers that are saying, "Wait, this is okay," because they've been taught that narrative about more police doesn't solve a problem so many times and for so long. Many of them actually come to believe it. Now, some of them know better, but some actually come to believe it. And when they see it happening, right? I mean, look, it's not a surprise to me or you or your listeners, right? It's very simple. Another problem is pay, right? We won't pay our police officers. We won't pay them enough. And every year the city wrings their hands and saying, "Well, we tried to hire. We're just having such a hard time. Shucks, it's competitive." Meanwhile, Trump said he wanted some ICE officers. He needed 10,000 positions, and he's got 150,000 applications in a matter of days, because he pays. And he says, "Pay you this much, and we'll give you a signing bonus." Boom, they fill the positions. Well, our city won't pay, and then they wring their hands saying, "Gosh, we don't know what the problem is." It's so juvenile. It's so childish. It's just laughable. that they perpetrate this. But I
Well,
guess it's worked for them forever. So there you go.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's also morale. They've hollowed out the profession. They've for decades changed the hiring practices of who they hire. I mean, they in most of these places they've got all these stupid hiring goals where they're trying to get 50% women, and all those sort of things create a poor result in terms of just recruitment. They also one of the worst things that they've done, as far as I'm concerned, and I think many people who are in the weeds in law enforcement would agree with me, but they stopped hiring warriors. They stopped hiring veterans. They stopped hiring people that are fresh off of military deployment, because they have a perception that those guys are going to be a problem, an issue. Oh, you're going to have a militarized police force. But no, what you have is you've got these brave and courageous warrior types that then you can teach them how to de-escalate. You can teach them how to be a community style policing officer, right? But you can't teach the other. You can't really teach a person to fly into the fray courageously like a missile. You just have to guide those missiles into learning other techniques, and learning to be that compassionate officer, and that is very possible.
There's no question. I tell you, things are so funny. It's like they should be part of a sitcom or something. When here in town they say, well, look, we've got our police academy. The police come through, and then all the local police departments, outside of the city, they hire our people away, and so we can't get enough people. So we need to go build another police academy. And then when you say, well, why don't you just hire all those people back by paying them $5,000 more a year? And they just stare at you like you just come up with the cure of cancer for cancer. It's just so foreign to them. It's like, why are we putting everybody for the police academy? Just go get them back. It's like being on that Jerry Seinfeld episode of Bizarro World, where everything is just opposite. The solutions, which are so easy and so straightforward, they act like they don't know them and they've never heard of them or something. Look, we are still, despite the city now saying they're complying with this Prop U, they're not. They need to raise starting pay of police officers $5,000 more, and they'll be in the top 5 of police departments here in North Texas. They raised it $5,000 and said that they're in compliance. They're not. They need another $5,000. But if they did, then the recruiting problem goes away.
Yeah.
But guess what? They don't want it to go away because they don't want to spend money in this area for a couple of reasons. One, they've got their whole crowd that's out there saying defund the police and all that craziness. And then they've got other places they want to spend their money because they got a buddy that's got this landscaping contract with the city, or they've got this over here and they don't want to spend it. So they kind of make a head fake towards doing something and then wring their hands. And here, September 17th, the city is going to, here in Dallas, is going to approve their budget, and they're going to be in violation of Prop U, and someone's, I'm sure, going to sue them because they're in violation, but they don't care about wasting taxpayer monies and having to go through all that. They don't care one bit.
All right. So aside from, bolstering the police force and paying them more, what are the other things in this program that, you think is a success, or, what's revolutionary that other cities can look at and take from it?
Well, it's really not revolutionary at all. It's hiring enough police officers, and
Just common sense.
and you got to pay them.
Can you believe it?
That's what. And for homelessness, we're working on a new homelessness center, and there's a number of great ones in town. Some not so great, some great. The first key is you got to get your homelessness centers out of downtown. You got to get them away from where everyone else is, and you've got to give people an option. You go to the homelessness center where they can be assessed and then directed to where they can get help. Or they can't be downtown, or in other neighborhoods or other people harassing the citizenry, and they just have to go. And if that means they get arrested, they get arrested. If that means they get pushed out, they get pushed out. But if they're not willing to accept help, and praise God in heaven, there is help. I mean, for a long time in our history, you couldn't get help. Now you can get help, and it's there. And so we're working on building a center south of town that has all these facilities and will be the one-stop shop. And we hope to get that up and going. So there's really even less of an excuse for any of that. But it's not revolutionary. It's not special. It's as plain as the nose on your face. It's just the willpower. And Trump, as you saw in D.C., has got the willpower. And when you have the power, this problem solved like that.
Yeah, no, it really is amazing. And I think, we got to get these, far lefties that have been running our cities out of the way. And I think you are right in terms of it is the business owners, the people that have a, big investment in the cities, need to band together because, if enough people come together, we can force their hand and insist on, actual law enforcement, reigning supreme again instead of these, hokey programs and, send a social worker out, progressive approaches that just do not work and seem to be, something that they're focusing on these days. So how do we help you?
Well, you could go to my newspaper and sign up for the newsletter, Dallas Express. We put out 25 articles a day, have had great success with it. And look for Refuge for Renewal. That's the name of this homelessness center. We hope to be setting up here soon. Dallas Hero might even go out there and be raising money from time to time. So, these are the organizations that are out there trying to make a difference in our city. And just encourage people. We need businesses to step up, business leaders, and we need church leaders. And with those voices being a lot stronger, it makes a difference. There's just too much fear. There's a spirit of fear out there that we know our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ did not give us. And it only comes from the enemy. And we have to get rid of that spirit and take on the spirit that God has given us.
Amen. Amen. Well, Monty, I hope there's more of you out there and, at least one of you in each city leading the charge, because I do think that we could turn things around really quickly with the political will and, with a little bit of power from the community behind us. So, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you, appreciate what you're doing. To God be the glory, and we are out. Hey, thank you for watching or listening to this show. If you are someone who listens to us on the podcast apps, please go to our Rumble channel. Even if you're not going to watch us there, we'd appreciate you hitting subscribe. We want to boost those numbers up and make sure that channel continues to grow. But again, thank you so much for listening to us.